Tape Deck Media.
Hi there, I am Kelly Zemnikas, and I am the host of a brand new podcast called Holler and Wine. I'm a stand-up comedian, I'm a documentary filmmaker, and I genuinely love talking to people. And despite the fact that I do not care for the sound of my own voice, I've got a podcast now. So please come join us. We're going to have really good conversations. We're going to talk about cocktails, and I am going to give my guests a tarot card reading because why not? So join us on Holler and Wine. Hope to see you soon. Well, it's a podcast, so it's hear you soon? That sounds weird.
Ruddle me this, ruddle me that. We got the riddles that'll make you chat. Oh yeah, baseline stuff with groove is tight. Get your funk on, we're rocking tonight. One more time.
Good morning, Ramblers. Welcome back to another episode of Ruddle Me This. I am, as always, your faithful host, the most villainous blackguard since Edward the Puppy Eater, Taylor Ruddle. Got a real treat for you this episode. I am being joined by another New Zealand podcaster. Now, this podcast is Simone Whitlow, and Simone is the creator of a podcast called Tales of History and Imagination. I've kind of done a terrible job of networking within the comedy community. I don't make a good first impression, so I'm really trying to do it right with the podcast community. I'm starting to try and reach out to other New Zealand podcasts and see if there is some kind of crossover that we can do. And this episode here is what I believe the kids are calling a swapcast. Simone and I basically just had a chat on Zoom, and I sort of condensed the conversation down into one audio file, so this will be also released on Simone's audio feed for Tales of History and Imagination. So it's great to be able to chat with another podcaster, someone who's been doing it for a lot longer than I have and has had a lot more success, I think, by the sound of it. So it was great to get to pick Simone's brain a little bit and just chat about what it's like being a podcaster in New Zealand. I don't really have any plugs to give you at the start of this episode. As of the time of this recording, I'm about 3 weeks out from recording my stand-up comedy special, Panic at the Buffet, but by the time this episode releases, it will have already been filmed. You know, knock on wood, barring any kind of acts of God hindering that. So just the usuals. Go and follow me on Facebook at Taylor Ruddle Comedy to see what kind of events I've got coming up in the future, just kind of the weekly comedy and quiz nights. Something else I'd like to start doing, along with the new nickname for each week, I'd like to introduce a quote of the week before I bring on the guest. And this quote was something that a good friend of mine, Mikey Lee, shout out to Mikey if you're listening. Mikey and I met doing stand-up a few years ago. He's currently moved on from stand-up a little bit, and he's more in the business world right now, but we were talking about being self-employed, and he said his experience was about being self-employed. He said, when things are going good, it's never as good as it seems, and when things are going bad, it's never as bad as it seems. And this really stuck in my mind as someone that's coming up on 2 years of being self-employed. He's basically right. You tend to despair. You have a big run of gigs, big run of work. You make a good amount of money, and you think, oh, well, maybe, the dream's alive. And then you have a quiet month afterward, and you think, oh, dear, like the dream's over. So just this quote, the way he said it, basically helped remind me that, like he says, the dream's not over. It's never going as bad as you think. But then also, conversely, you have to be careful because, it's also never necessarily going as good as you think, because there's always work to be done, always improvements to be made. So you shouldn't rest on your laurels or anything like that. But yes, I just wanted to share that quote with you before we get into the actual interview. So, enough out of me. Thank you for listening once again. I hope you enjoy the conversation. We get into some interesting topics. As you can imagine, there's a lot of history talk, a lot of music talk, a lot of podcast insider information. And Simone, she's really into something called Forteana, which was my first time of hearing about it. And so we talk a little bit about what that exactly is. So, once again, please welcome to the show, from History and Imagination podcast, Simone Whitlow. Hello, Simone. Nice to meet you kind of face-to-face finally-ish.
Yeah. Hey, Taylor, lovely to meet you.
Yeah. So this is going to be quite a random, I think, episode for both of our followers, but the way we kind of, I guess, I don't know, were you aware of me at all before I reached out to you?
Yes, through the well, yes and no. Through the group, absolutely.
Yeah.
So you were always putting in new stuff, and
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it looks great. Obviously, I guess we all get a little bit, but we don't have enough time to follow everything coming through on the Facebook group.
Oh, absolutely not. Yeah, totally. But it seems to be us two are definitely two of the most consistent posters, I think, on that. I can't think of any others that I see like every week or so. So yeah, I just thought it would be cool if we. I don't know. I'm not really in like the podcasting community. Would you consider yourself a part of it, or is there even one?
I guess there might be. I've never had an invite.
Story of my life, eh?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. There's a few folk I know, but and obviously there's that whole awards thing that happens every year now.
Yeah.
It's which I don't know. I suppose maybe it's worthwhile putting a bit of cash that way, but I never have. It's sort of I don't know.
It's
is it worthwhile?
It's so yeah, I was curious to see your point of view on that. I guess just to backtrack slightly, because we'll be on each other's sort of feed. I am a stand-up comedian and a podcaster, and you're kind of like a musician turned podcaster, is that right?
Yes. For quite a few years, I was playing in a group called Ishtar.
That's a great name.
Sort of Babylonian goddess of love, sex, and war. It's just sort of
what more could you want?
Yeah, absolutely. Sounds a whole lot more deliberate than it was. We had a song called Temple of Ishtar, and we had no band name, and we had a gig in like week and a half, 2 weeks. I think that's probably I don't know, maybe half the bands out there pick the names, truthfully.
Yeah, well, I think one of my favorite bands is a band called Ghost, and they, I think, chose their name kind of haphazardly, and now that they've gotten really, really big, you do hear the lead singer think, yeah, we maybe should have thought a little better about the name of the band, but what are you going to do, right?
Yeah.
I think I saw on your About Me, did you play the lute?
I don't. I'd love to play the lute. I do. It was mostly a lot of guitar, play a little bit of mandolin, tiniest bit of keyboards. Mostly it was a guitar player, and a little bit of backing vocals and stuff like that. Yeah, it was a lot of, I sort of started off learning like classical guitar as a kid. So, that whole thing with bark pieces and stuff's not a million miles from what I was doing, but obviously it'd be a whole different set of muscles and skills and everything, I think, to play a lute.
Yeah, quite possibly. I have like negative music talent. I've recently tried playing a little bit of the guitar, but I think you've got to. It seems the sort of thing you got to sort of dedicate your life to becoming really good at. But yeah, that's just me from the outsider looking in.
Yeah, I reckon it's sort of, you get to a point where you can get lazy and just sort of only time you ever practice is when you show up to practice for a gig and actually at the gig. But it's been a long, long time since I've really picked up a guitar and woodshedded. I'd be atrocious these days. It's like muscles. You use them or lose them a wee bit.
Yeah, that's the case. You see, you do all the music for your podcast, is that right?
Yeah, when I started off, I was doing all that stuff on acoustic guitar. But then my Android tablet died. I went and bought an Apple to replace it, and an iPad, and lo and behold, it had GarageBand on there, all these little virtual keyboards and things. So I mean, all of that sort of stuff's just done on the iPad these days on GarageBand.
Wow, that's very cool. It all seems like magic to me as someone who doesn't have the abilities. I think probably maybe design. You do all the graphic design for your show as well?
God, I don't want to admit too much to this. To a point I was. I mean, it's the last thing to get done, and it's usually done in a rush. And
Sounds like mine too.
Yeah. I mean, content's got to be important, right?
Uh-huh.
It's
Yeah.
over the the stuff on the edges. But yeah, I got a thing called Bazart, which yeah, they suddenly added an AI thing, and I hate to admit that much that I sort of scrimp on that last bit. But if you're not sort of churning over a whole lot of money, would I prefer to be paying an artist to be doing stuff? Absolutely. Um, but it's sort of, I don't know, it'd be blank if I wasn't using it.
Yeah,
I mean, one of
absolutely.
the yeah,
I
there's a
think.
guy. Oh, sorry.
No, no, please go ahead.
No, I was just about to say there's a guy in Canada, Sebastian Major, thinking of history podcasts and things, our fake history, and he's got a friend, Frank Fiorentino, does all the art for his, and it's a new original piece each time.
Wow.
And I kind of steal a whole sort of comic book sort of
Right.
feel off what he does.
I see. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I'd love to be making enough money or to have a partner in crime who could do that stuff, I guess.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think I was just sort of randomly watching The Godfather, random clips from The Godfather today on YouTube, and I've got another friend that we might eventually do this as a podcast, but we've had this sort of theory about famous duos. Like, do you ever watch South Park before?
Not for many years, but yeah, when it
You'd be
was
sort of
first on.
familiar. Yeah. They've got this sort of partnership where it's not entirely clear what one of the two brings to the table, but it's one of those things where, like, without him, the band doesn't work. So I think maybe there was an old thing with Van Halen. Once who was it? David Lee Roth left. People were like, nah, the band's not the same anymore. There's sort of an intangible thing there, and the idea of partnerships with podcasts has been tough because I'm gonna guess that we're the same personality type. You seem like you are quite a like get shit done sort of person, and I've never quite found anyone that I had the exact same like work flow or yeah, just never quite meshed. Is that the because you're a solo podcaster as well, aren't you?
Yeah, just me all by myself. Yeah, I'd say so. I mean, one of the things that was most frustrating with bands and stuff,
Oh, of course, yeah.
yeah, it was usually like with Spinal Tap, the drummer used to blow up or something. We
Yep.
we used to do the same with bass players. It's like
Gotcha.
every other month, yeah, new bass player, start from scratch.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean it does. It's a great way to suddenly find yourself off the road for 3 or 4 months just when you're getting a little bit of buzz. And yeah, I don't know. I often think it would be quite cool to have like a duo, do the whole back and forth thing, like oh, I don't know,
The
Behind
Rest
the
Is History.
Bastards comes to mind. Rest is history. Yep.
Yep. They've got a great
That's sort of,
a great band to those two, yeah.
yeah. I mean that would be awesome. I sort of worry that I'm too much just a random narrator in what I do, but yeah,
I think for
it's
me, I'm a little bit much of a control freak. I kind of need I need creative control. Hang on, I'm just gonna mute myself while I cough right there. Oh god. Yeah, but then I found I can have the best of both worlds by doing kind of side projects. Like we have a side project called Hosstown, which is episodes I do every month where I've got a sort of regular co-host on that. And that has been quite nice because then I can sort of do the single like I think I guess is this something you've struggled with as well as trying to pitch your podcast to people? Like I guess you have a clearly defined niche, so it's probably not crazy difficult.
Yeah. I mean, it's sort of I don't know. I sometimes think about where I sort of sit with my niche. Like, I don't feel like I'm a serious sort of history podcast. You got these historians out there. Some of them likes of I don't know. William Dalrymple recently sort of started his whole empire thing, and
I actually listened to that. It's quite a good one too.
oh, I've been meaning to. I've been working through his latest book recently on audiobook, Golden Path, and
It's the one
Yeah.
I'm thinking of. He just released one today about the Tyrannosaurus Rex. I could be thinking of the wrong podcast, though.
Oh,
Is
he
it
was on that as a guest the other week, I think, wasn't he? There was the
the Ancients?
one of the history hits one. Yes, the
That's
Ancients.
the one. Yes, so I'm very much looking
Yeah.
forward to listening to that tonight. What
Yeah,
are some?
me
what are
too,
some,
actually.
Yeah.
Sorry.
What are some of your favorites that you have in sort of in your weekly rotation?
The biggest one is actually, well, it's social history, and that's a history of rock music in 500 songs.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it's an English guy, Andrew Hickey, who's 176 songs into the list at the moment.
Wow. Of 500.
Of 500,
Oh
he
my
started
God.
back in 1938, and I mean, I would kind of consider, like, he started in the pre-rock era and all the stuff that leads up to it. But some of the stuff he's covered, I'd say, well, that sounds like rock and roll to me, just all the way back even then, you know?
Yeah.
And I sort of, yeah, I mean, this whole thing that Ike Turner invented rock and roll, no way, no how. There was maybe, at least 50 records that were rock and roll records before he even released Rock at 88.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's a biggie.
Very cool.
Yeah, and then what else? A thing called The Conspirators, which
I've heard
there's
of
a
it.
guy on. Oh, it's good fun. There's a guy goes under the name Nate Hale, and it's an assumed identity, and I presume that he's going off Nathan Hale, the guy who was a spy in the American Wars of Independence and got executed for spying on the British.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure what he does in his day to day. I get the sense, and I could be completely wrong and off base with this, that he's a guy of a history background like myself, but he's not a historian as such.
Yeah.
Just a crazy history buff. And yeah, I mean, a lot of his stuff sort of pitches towards the whole Forteana. I don't know if even sort of too many of the folks that sort of follow my show know what I mean by that. There was a guy, Charles Fort, who, like Robert L. Ripley, they wrote books and things on strange occurrences, strange historical occurrences. And where Ripley was more, well, I'm just going to leave it completely up to you to decide if this really happened or not, believe it or not.
Oh, yeah, of course, yeah.
Yeah, so there's that sort of thing with Ripley, where Fort is more of a skeptic. But you kind of look back on a lot of his stuff now, and it would be easy to just take him as being a bit of a crank. I think he was a bit.
Oh, okay.
But there's a lot of those sort of, like there's a guy, Mike Dash, still is, I think he still does a Reddit Ask Me Anything type thing every once in a while. Historian, legit historian. There's a lot of submarine stuff. And he was one of maybe even the head of the Fortean Times, head editor for a while. He was writing for the Fortean Times.
Yeah.
Did a lot of weird things, and at one point, like he had a guest piece regular piece that he'd do for Penthouse magazine, where people would ask him random things, like, you know, what wins in a fight between a gorilla and a grizzly bear?
That sounds like a modern podcast.
Oh yeah. Well, this is the thing. I almost feel like if Mike Dash did a podcast, I don't know where I'd fit in the world, because he was sort of, first I'd discovered him was his blog back in early 2000s, maybe. Yeah. He just had a bit of buzz over a piece on, well, there's a story that King of Ethiopia, I forget which one, I don't think it was Haile Selassie, might have been Tewodros or somebody, you know, a little bit earlier. Had been to America and seen an electric chair and said, I want an electric chair.
Right.
And he gets it. Well, this is the thing. He gets it back. So the legend goes. Gets it back to Ethiopia, and suddenly discovers you need electricity to run it. So, I mean, it's a great story, but it's also majorly insulting to, you know, African nations who had electricity for a start. So it was that he debunked all that.
Right.
He So he's like, well, they had electricity.
Yeah. So
And
the idea of
yeah.
calling something Fortean, is that a bit like how, let's say, for example, H.P. Lovecraft was the author, but if something
Yeah.
is Lovecraftian, it's a genre of fiction, or it's kind of sounds like it's non-fiction almost.
Yeah, I'd say so. I mean, the one biggest, probably most famous book from his time is a thing he wrote called The Book of the Dead, which is mostly just about weird coincidences and things. There's
Right.
stuff about people dying, and
Interesting.
it is an interesting read, but it's lots and lots of little things. Picked up this thing and that thing in a newspaper, and he'd be talking about raining frogs and all that sort of crazy stuff.
Yeah.
Most famous one of his, I think, is that he tells the story of how did he bring this one up? Well, Ambrose Bierce, right, who was a writer who disappeared somewhere out in Mexico, going to join Pancho Villa for an interview. I don't think he tells it from the Pancho Villa side, though. From the Ambrose Bierce, it's the other Ambrose, the Canadian theatre director who went missing, which was nothing terribly mysterious.
Right. Yeah.
Oh God, I'm blanking on the guy's surname now. But
That's
he,
all
he
right.
made the whole thing, the whole comment that God must have had a thing for Ambroses that week. It's sort of it's that kind of really, and a lot of it's really corny like that too. But
Yeah. Gotcha. So it was
yeah,
comedic in its own kind of way.
yeah, I'd say so.
Wow.
It's that sort of strange but true sort of stuff. It
Yeah.
just makes for weird sort of trivia.
I'm gonna have to
Um,
look it up a bit later on and sort of see some examples of it. Sounds kind of interesting. Yeah.
yeah.
I was gonna say we should talk about as well as how long have you been running your podcast for?
Well, story about that. I started a blog.
Yes.
Yep. And the blog preceded the podcast by a couple of months. But the thing I had in mind was really wanted to do a podcast and the two would feed into one another.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I bought a Blue Yeti microphone that hissed at me all the time and stuff.
Yep.
And
My first mic as well.
oh, they make good door stops. I believe that, if you're really skilled with them, you can get magic out of them. I never could. Hated the damn thing. So, I run about 7 or 8 episodes and was even sort of a little embarrassed to put it out there. So I got maybe about 60 plays. And in the meantime, the blog itself was getting some good reads.
Nice.
So I just veered away for that and stayed away until a weird thing happened when Joe Rogan of all people, he shows up on the Spotify.
Yeah.
What would that have been? Maybe late 2020, late 2020?
Yeah, that sounds about right. That was when his big deal kind of went through.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's suddenly.
Yeah, around about pandemic, I would say.
Yeah, had to be in that sort of ballpark in any case. And all of a sudden, I was getting notifications. I had like 450 downloads in a day, and it went off a cliff. It stopped after that.
Oh,
But I suddenly thought, well, oh God, I don't really like that I've still got those up there. But maybe there is some sort of interest in it. And
yeah.
as every once in a while you do get something that like I had a weird day the other day where sitting in work at a meeting and suddenly I'm getting notifications from a blog that I've had 2,000 visitors in the last hour.
Wow.
And I don't know where it came from. It was about 2 months ago, somebody from some website that sells sheet music
Yeah.
had, and I don't know when exactly, it'd been a while back, they run a blog on their own thing, and somebody had said, oh, we found this site and there's a write-up on the many ways Glenn Miller could have died. It was an episode, The Many Deaths of Glenn Miller, looking at all the various theories. I mean, I think he just as plain fell out of the sky of the English Channel, but
Right. Yeah.
yeah, but that went crazy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's generally, I don't know, I'm ticking along at maybe 50 downloads a day. It's not awful, but I could
Yeah, I would be very happy with 50 a day. I'm, I think my journey has been sort of the opposite. I guess with podcasts, you can sort of go one of two directions. Like, you can have a niche, which is a little bit easier for people to find, but I find
Yeah.
myself too capricious and fickle to stick to one thing. So my podcast is essentially like what I'm interested in at the moment. Like currently we're going through Shakespeare line by line, and I've got
Oh,
a Shakespearean expert like explaining what each line means to me and everything like that. So it's the downs a bit like you. I have one episode that I did about the band Kiss, which for some reason is really big in South America. Like every day or every
Oh.
other day, I've got a couple of downloads from somewhere in South America downloading this random episode about the band Kiss. So it is just bizarre. How, you almost want to think to yourself like, how did you find this to like get to people that find it? But it's podcasting,
Yeah.
isn't it?
oh, it is. It's a strange beast. I say I sort of fell back into it in 2020, and I still don't know what I'm doing. And I guess one of the things I know there's people out there listening,
Yeah.
and I know there's people following, which is cool. There's a lot
Yeah.
less follow than listen.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I don't know. I'd love it if they came and just said hi every once in a while. You know.
Okay. So it's not just me that, that feels this shouting into the void kind of experience.
I reckon. Yeah, I reckon it's probably most of us.
Yeah.
And then there's the other side to that is if all of a sudden it took off. I don't know how I'd sort of feel about that. Would you sort of? I mean, I'd love the numbers to go up, but also like talking about history of rock music and 500 songs. There's a lot of people out there telling Andrew Hickey how he should be doing his job. I think that would drive me nuts.
Yes, I think that's the two-edged sword, double-edged sword. Sorry, it's my brain didn't work there for a second, but yeah, when you ask people for their input on it, you you then actually have to hear what they have to say, and some of the time maybe you don't really want to hear what people have to say, right?
Oh yeah. Well, I've definitely got that feeling from when I used to play in bands and stuff. And you get someone come up afterwards and say, "Hey, love your stuff, man, but what's with all the guitar solos?"
Right.
Or had a female singer, and you get these heavy metal guys that are just like, "Nah, you need a growler, girl singers suck," and all this sort of thing.
Oh, geez.
Yeah,
It's the being at the whim of the masses is interesting because I can imagine, in a few years, like let's say one of our podcasts takes off, maybe the days when you don't have to hear everyone's little opinion are kind of like you look back on that and think, oh man, I miss the days when I wasn't hearing about it. Like I used to work at a little pizza shop, and when I started working there, my least favorite job to do was washing dishes, because it just seemed boring and your hands get all fucked up by the soap and everything. And my boss came over one time and he patted me on the shoulder and he's like, "You're going to miss washing these dishes eventually." And I was like, "No, I'm not. What? This sucks. I hate doing this." And then years later, when I was promoted to a manager and I was having to deal with customers and all the, everything comes down to your sign off and you've got people coming to you for problems and you're putting out fires and you just think, yeah, I wouldn't mind just being in the corner of the shop washing dishes.
yeah, absolutely. I can relate. I used to love back when I was at a university, just go off and just grab a labouring job for the summer,
Right. Yeah, of
Fit
course.
and healthy. God, I was skinny in those days. That's a long time back. But just zoning out. There was I worked in a place years and years ago, Danco Adhesive Tapes. I don't know if it's still around. Probably are. They had a warehouse down the bottom of the place, and you'd sort of show up just before Christmas. And the first job was, well, we don't really have anything for you right now, so here's a broom. Go down and sweep that warehouse. And it's like nobody had done it since the last time I'd been there, like 6 months ago.
Yeah.
There's a kind of a zen in that. I'm misusing the word zen, aren't I? But you know what I mean?
No,
you just zone out and just
I think another word for that could be Tao, which is a kind of yeah, I know what you're meaning. And apparently, working as a bricklayer is a great job for creatives to have because you spend all day just thinking and your hands are kept busy. And then by the time you get off work, you know, you've been fizzing away with ideas all day. So it's great. Like the previous job I just left was as a graphic designer. And so using your brain quite a bit, trying to use your creativity all day, you get home and you think, okay, it's time to write jokes, time to do this. And I'm just spent. So I think, yeah, there's something in a sort of not exhausting task, but something to keep your body moving, but not almost sort of put your brain into like low power mode, I guess would be the way to think of it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Which I think actually is probably where a lot of our listeners sit. They'll be working a office job or a warehouse packing job, that kind of thing. Because like that was basically my target audience was people like me who were working in an office and would download all their new podcasts on the Monday morning drive to work, and then that would sort of get me through the week. So I thought, well, if that was what I was doing, I'm sure there are others out there like that.
Yeah. I've never given it a lot of, I should do. I know it's a marketing thing, isn't it? At least if you sort of know who you're marketing to.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, I don't know. If you're making the show for yourself, you're kind of making it for others, I guess, and it'll be, hopefully you find your own tribe. And
yeah, exactly. I think, is that kind of how you went into it with your one, just making the stuff you wanted to hear?
Absolutely that, yeah. Like I say, I mean, there's a couple of shows I've come across since, The Conspirators. Historical Blindness is something slightly different, but cover a lot of the things I cover or would like to cover in future. The Constant sort of when I grow up, I'd like to be the Constant, but you know, Mark Chrysler from the Constant, he's much more about, you know, mistakes people make and about science and stuff. But so when I first started, I was still sort of looking out for stuff, and I don't know that I'd found many of those shows. Dan Carlin was one of the things, you know, obviously the Hardcore History. And
love that show.
Fantastic show. The world stops when Dan Carlin drops something.
Yes.
Find a way to just sort of be on meeting or whatever for the next couple of hours and just,
I have heard that about whenever there's a new something to do with Dragon Ball Z getting dropped, genuinely Mexican cartel violence drops because they're all big fans of it and they watch it. Yeah, so.
Oh God, that's awesome!
Yeah, I loved it. Yeah. So we just had the 10 minutes Zoom thing pop up, so we were sort of approaching the wrap up, I suppose. But I had we're just sort of talking about, I guess, as a podcaster, like what is your like? Have you got any ideas as to how we can sort of push them? Like I guess I'm just thinking about the idea of the community and stuff. Like, are you going to bother applying for the awards this year?
Maybe I might sort of feel things out a little bit. I've been choosing to be a little bit of a hermit in recent years because of COVID and all the rest. But yeah, I mean, it would be good. I feel like, I don't know, thinking back to my mate Andrew Hickey and his whole thing, you know, the bands that you see come through were part of a wider community. And the odd groups that sort of, there's a song, Kokomo, it's not the Beach Boys song. It was a song from about 1954 or 55. A couple, Gene and Eunice, and there was it's 56. We'll go 56. One of the biggest songs of the year. There were dozens of covers of it and all the rest. They're forgotten. They were a one-hit wonder because they weren't part of the bigger community. And yeah, I mean, I think we probably all, number one, feel like we're probably yelling out to the void, even much bigger podcasters than ourselves. And number two, I think we probably live or die by being part of a community. And yeah, I really, really feel the lacking of that compared to playing in bands and stuff years ago. And you sort of, things, all sorts of things lit up there. Do you sort of feel the same yourself, or
Yeah,
thinking
so
about maybe?
and I suspect you might be on the money when you say that most of us all kind of feel that, because I think it's the same in stand up, is that like people tend to feel like there are cliques that they're not a part of, but then the people that they're looking at as a clique that's like excluding them will be looking at someone else. And so I think we all, to an extent, feel like we're outsiders. I think as well, because podcasting and stand-up can be so individualistic, it's really easy to get tunnel vision and only focus on your own show. And like that's nothing wrong with that. But whenever I collaborate with other people, I am reminded how nice community feels. And so yeah, I don't know. I know there are some podcasts a lot bigger than me who are relatively active in the groups that we're kind of posting our stuff in. So I might start seeing if I can whip up some sort of like New Zealand podcast cinematic universe where we're all kind of crossing over and everything. Which, you know, if that's the case, you can consider this this is Iron Man showing up in Captain America's credits or something of two podcasts crossing over.
Yeah.
So
That's
yeah,
cool.
I'm lucky enough to be able to do stand up and this kind of thing full time. So I have a lot of time to dedicate to logistics, which, you know, when you're dealing with artists, if you can make the logistics side work, then you can actually make things happen, because, you know, quite a lot of the time you leave it to the artists to do it and nothing happens. So yeah, I don't know. I'm just kind of rambling now, but I'm just sort of keeping an eye out for the other podcasters who seem to be hustling. And yeah, I don't know. I'm just going to try and do what I can to encourage crossover between all of us. And I think I probably will apply. I mean, I've got to make a best of show, which is something that I didn't know people want, but I saw a thread on Reddit the other day that said they wished more shows would do a best of. And I hate them because I listen quite well. And I'm like, I've heard this before. It's not new. So it doesn't really appeal to me. But in order to apply for the podcast awards, you've got to submit 15 minutes of like good stuff. So I think, well, if I just make 30 minutes, chop it in half, that's my application right there. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think I'm going to do it.
Yeah, I may join you. I think it would be good.
You're
Like,
based
say
up
for
in
the
Auckland, aren't
community.
you?
I am, yeah, up in.
Well, there you go. If I
yeah.
end up heading up there, we may bump into each other. Let's get some plugs in. So your podcast, just to make sure I've got it correctly, is called Tales of History and Imagination. Did I get that correct?
That is correct.
What are the social media pages that people can, I guess you've just got a website which people can go to, yeah?
I do. Historyandimagination.com. I do have, I need to be far more active on social media. It's, the site formerly known as Twitter, particularly, I think, has just ground me down in the last year or so.
Yeah, I can absolutely see why.
Yeah, but I am on there. Better to look me up under Simone Whitlow. There is a Tales of History and Imagination Twitter, X, whatever we want to call the page. It does sort of kind of get watched, but I'm vaguely active on my own personal one. I've dipped my toes into Threads. I'm not sure that I get what Threads is for yet. Yeah. And obviously I'm around Facebook a little bit, but I'm just not active anywhere, not publicly active. But yeah, anyone can find me on historyandimagination.com, and where I will announce at some point where I'm hoping to be active on the socials. I'm hopeless. I'm worse than hopeless on the socials.
Fantastic. And then for your listeners, this is appearing in your feed as well. You can listen to mine at ruddlemethis.com. It is the best way I can sum it up is it's a lot of eclectic stuff. I am very curious about the world, so I bring on all sorts of artists and science people and guests. And it's basically, if you're interested in what it's like to see what it's like coming up as a stand-up comedian in New Zealand, give my podcast a listen. And then social media, everything is at Taylor Ruddle Comedy. I was fortunate enough to get the same tag on everything, so yay.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, very lucky. Well, that's about it, really. So, yeah, thanks for giving up some of your time, Simone. It's been cool to meet you, and let's hope that this might be the first kind of kickoff in a little bit of a podcast, what do I call it? Podcast cinematic universe?
Yes, let's make it happen.
Hell yeah. Thank you for listening to Ruddle Me This. Don't forget to hit subscribe and leave me a review on your favorite podcast platform. You can find me on social media at Taylor Ruddle Comedy on all the major platforms. You can also join patreon.com/Taylor Ruddle Comedy for free, which gets you access to all sorts of extras and behind the scenes content, as well as allows you to communicate directly with me and let me know what you think of the show. Tune in again next Monday for another episode of Ruddle Me This, and until then, Ruddle her out.
This has been a Tape Deck Media production. Thank you for listening.
Hey Ruddlers, I joined a group of podcasters that we are calling the Trailer Alliance, a group of podcasters that share each other's trailers at the end of the episodes and generally support each other. So at the end of each episode for the next few weeks, I'm going to be playing a trailer of one of the members of the Trailer Alliance. And here's one of them now. I hope you like it.
Hello, Like Mother, Like Murder listeners. I am Rachel.
And I'm Heather.
We are the hosts of Like Mother, Like Murder.
We bring you the good, the badass, and the crime.
Each week, we bring you stories from missing and murdered
to survivors and women who empower you.
And of course, some mom talk sprinkled in.
Check us out wherever you get your podcasts at Like Mother, Like Murder.
And give us a follow on social media so that we can say hi.
Okay, love you, bye.
Okay, love you, bye.